Welcome back to our special show. Is Telecom the new steel? We are discussing whether the mountain of debt in the telecom sector requires some kind of policy intervention from the government, making it easier for the companies perhaps to bear the historical burden of spectrum price or sharing of spectrum. Well, before going to break, Mr. Rajeev Chandrasekhar argued that public resources like spectrum will have to be priced so that the nation gets a revenue advantage and cannot be priced very cheap. But exactly that question to our guest Nitin Soni from Fitch Ratings. Nitin, thank you very much for your patience. But do you think, this is the mistake the Indian industry made? Too many players and too much of predatory pricing. But how is it run in other countries? Can the government do something to make the burden easier?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Lata. Let me share a few paradoxes in our Indian telecom industry. The first is you have the most expensive raw material, which is spectrum in the world, among the most expensive in the world. And you have the cheapest tariff of $2, which is one of the cheapest in the world, $2, which is the last quarterly ARPU number for Bharti. Second paradox is that you have is government leases you an asset and then also ask for a revenue sharing from the income you are generating. So it's like they're leasing you an apartment, but then they also want a revenue sharing from the income you earn every month. Okay. The third paradox is that you have, such an expensive 3G and 4G spectrum, but the data adoption in India has been so poor that it lags even, some of the Southeast Asian countries. I mean, forget comparing about Singapore and Hong Kong. I mean, compare it with Indonesia or maybe China or Philippines. The average usage on mobile data per month per user for market leader Bharti is about 1 GB right now. So that's too low. So all these factors have contributed to a lot of problems for especially the smaller telcos. And this problem has been compounded by the recent entry of Jio, which has invested $25 to $30 billion and offered an unprecedented free services for 6 months, which again has never happened in any part of the world. And, treating their investment as a startup. And that has accelerated the consolidation, and that's why, the smaller telcos are facing a heat. We downgraded Reliance Communication today to CCC, as we think that now the default is a real possibility, as their liquidity is so stretched that they have just 14 billion cash INR, and short-term debt is 400 billion INR.
Got it. Got it. Absolutely pertinent points, and I think that you hit the nail on the head there, Nitin. Just coming back to you, Mr. Matthews, if I can come to you, you said you are in favor of some sort of intervention, or let's call it help from the government. What exactly are you looking for?
So I think those couple of items have been very clearly articulated by the TRAI itself. And I think Nitin put it very well by saying, look, you've really taken 2 bites of the apple. One, you've got your payment upfront for spectrum, and you continue to start taking 11 to 14% by way of revenue share, which should have stopped. So what we're asking for, as the TRAI has recommended, reduce the license fee from its present 8% to 3%, reduce the spectrum usage charge from its 4 to 3 or 4% to 1%, adopt the definition of AGR, which excludes non-telecom related revenue, and perhaps look at some other factors like a moratorium on the debt repayments. We have a 2-year moratorium, perhaps that can be extended to 5 years and given a repayment over the life of the spectrum as is done. I just want to highlight one other thing vis-a-vis practice in other parts of the world. Very seldom, if at all, do you see spectrum being taken back from an existing operator. Okay. Usually spectrum is given in perpetuity. All right, so here's another instance where you have this recurring issue. And so those are the things I think the government can address without any quote-unquote subsidy.
No, I doubt the moratorium would be something that the government can do, because that would mean several other industries would also ask. And in any case, that looks like a moral hazard. But Mr. Baijal, last thoughts from you. there are steps that Mr. Matthew has pointed out. You also argued that cheaper spectrum would be a national advantage, considering that we are going to move all our payments to telecom and to the digital mode. So we would need healthy spectrum. Your thoughts, therefore, if, as Rajeev Chandrasekhar said, cheaper spectrum should also come with price controls.
Well, if I examine what Mr. Rajeev Chandrasekhar said and what COI Chief Executive said, I agree with both. The problem with the government is that the government always is answerable both ways. Industry is not doing well, you must see that the industry does well. If the operators are not done well, you are the government, you are the sovereign, and therefore you've got to help them. Here, another hazard is, I think you pointed out, which is very true, that you don't give any relief to the industry. Then you land up in recapitalizing the banks. However, it has to be realized that no country in the world had 11, 12, 13 operators. That was an anomaly which should not have been allowed to come, but however, it came in, so let's forget it. So that anomaly has to be sorted out by allowing easy mergers so that you come to an optimal number. Second, if you have more spectrum, your network is healthy, and if your network is healthy, then everyone gains. And therefore I said, when India had given 130 megahertz, I used to shout even then that 130 megahertz is bad. Everywhere you have the same amount of spectrum. You can give 300 megahertz in all countries if the spectrum is properly refarmed. And if there is enough spectrum to go around, then of course the price will not go up. So these sensitive issues have to be played on the razor's edge. I agree with all the views which have been expressed, but there has to be a view of the sovereign. And of course, of course, the regulator is an independent body, but regulator also recommends to the government.
The
so
government has to
government ultimately takes a view, and I do feel that the industry needs help and the industry needs some restructuring.
Nitin, very briefly, for companies that you track and you rate, are any in any serious imminent trouble?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have downgraded Reliance Communication today to CCC, and then we think that the default is a real possibility given their liquidity is quite stretched.
Okay.
Apart, I think, from the weaker telcos, you know, Tata Group and Aircel and all these weaker telcos are really in trouble, and you know, they will face
Nitin, we are sorry we're running out of time. 10 seconds for your idea of a solution.
Yeah, I mean, government will have to definitely take steps for a cheaper spectrum, remove all this revenue sharing or maybe lower it, remove the universal service obligations from the telcos. I think it's no longer needed. And I think the national industry structure has corrected now. We will soon have 3 strong players.
Yes.
And at some point of time, the pricing power will come back as you will raise tariffs at some point of time.
All right, I'm sorry, we are completely out of time, but it was a fruitful discussion. Mr. Baijal, Mr. Chandrasekhar, Rajan Matthew and Nitin Soni, thank you very much for participating. The government can do a little bit, perhaps, to make mergers easy and spectrum burden more bearable. Thank you very much for watching our special Is Telecom the News Team.